about aging populations and the geopolitical perspective, moderated by Comito, joined by Jasmine, Niklas, Anzinger, and Moderator. So take it away.
Excellent. Hello, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the summit so far, and thanks for attending this panel. Aging populations, geopolitical perspective. So, as we all know, aging affects every person in the world. So we're responsible for the vast majority of all diseases, and consequently suffering in the world, with nearly 2 people perishing every second due to aging. It affects everyone. But this doesn't mean that we all experience aging in the same way, either at the individual level or the level of countries, states, or economic zones. So what we want to speak about here today on this panel is how all of us dealing with the diseases and disabilities of aging can learn from each other and more quickly bring about a world free from these disabilities. And hopefully how we here in the capital of the United States of America right now can help lead that way. So joining me for this discussion is a truly excellent panel of speakers from a good cross-section of the field. Matt Davies, all the way on the right, founder and CEO of MiniCircle, a company that aims to extend length and quality of human life through plasmid gene therapy, clinical research, and commercialization in the U.S. and other countries. Jasmine Smith, from Immediate Life, CEO and co-founder of Review.ai, which is working to create accessible longevity through a combination of artificial intelligence and blockchain technology, aiming to democratize what we do for us. And in the middle, Niklas Anzinger, general partner of Anzinger VC, a venture capital firm based in the charter city of Prospera in Honduras, and CEO of Comito City, a decentralized city focused on life science and biotech acceleration. So a big hand for everyone here before we begin. Excellent work. So let's start things off by delving into the scope of the issue at hand. With global demographics shifting older, for example, the world's population of people aged 60 and above is expected to double to 2.1 billion by 2050. How are different regions of the world experiencing this population, and which countries are most affected and why? Matt, I know MiniCircle works with administration to discuss that.
Yeah, well, what I would like to see is a global and local culture of health and vitality. What keeps me up at night, honestly, I'm often thinking about Japan and Korea and the Asian populations there and what can be done to sustain their culture and their ethnicity long term. It's in a dire place. We need life extension technology. We need health span improvement in those places as much as in others. I think that I would love to. In the U.S., there are certain cities that are very health centric. I think like Denver, I think like LA, Austin, San Francisco, and would love to see this cultural shift towards more experimentation and more discussion and more people putting themselves into their health and measuring their biomarkers and getting fit and scaling those ventures.
So you mentioned Japan, obviously. I think the term was mentioned earlier, the gray wave, like this catastrophe that arises when population aging is occurring in birth rates. Obviously, countries like Japan kind of were, I think you'd say, a canary in the coal mine for the rest of the world with the birth rates dropping in the U.S., for example. Maybe, Jasmine, you can sort of speak of maybe some other countries or maybe the social, cultural aspects of this, how different countries might treat their elderly in a different way, whether it's the burden of economic states or families.
Yeah, definitely. Different countries have different ways that they kind of approach aging. They kind of have a lot of elder care homes, and kind of Western countries are developing more of this more taking care of them hands-on. But overall, I think that aging is kind of a great unifier. It's something that's going to happen to everybody, regardless of what country or nation or nationality that you're in. And, generally I think that just means that it's something that we all have to kind of focus on and, appreciate that, you're mentioning. Essentially that, the population demographics are shifting everywhere. It's not just, even in the developing world where some of the more infectious diseases are still in the top 10 causes of mortality. Overall, that's going to happen to everybody. It's not going to just stop there to where, okay, they're trying to extend their lifespans and then all of a sudden they're not going to age and, the cardiovascular disease and the cancer and diabetes are not going to take over and do the same exact thing. It's all going to happen. So I think that this aging and silver tsunami is kind of something that's shared, and that we definitely should all be making initiatives in all the world and making that something that we all want to aim for. Because nobody wants to die, nobody wants to see their relatives get sick. Even people in China and Russia and places that geopolitically we may be in disagreement with or fighting and all that sort of thing. We all have those shared cultural values that we want to see our parents and grandparents in good health. We want ourselves to continue to be in good health. And as Matt was mentioning, having that as a priority of society and culture is overall going to elevate us. It's going to elevate us cognitively, spiritually, mentally, and physically as well.
Building off of that, obviously it was mentioned before that COVID kind of served as a great firing call, I think, for waking everybody up that almost everything is an age-related disease. So you said, the word should there, Jasmine, countries that should be adopting this policy. So I think that can cross us over maybe to go to Niklas of, what are different countries doing in terms of policy, things related to retirement, immigration, etc. What is being done right, what is being done wrong, and where are the avenues for things like special economic zones to maybe turn away and continue this?
Very much from the avenue of medical innovation. Right? So, of course, there is public health policies in different countries, but I think what you're really in this industry really kind of at the frontier in terms of developing innovative treatments. Right? So that's what I can say most about. And what I can say there is while the United States is still sort of the deepest ethanol market in the world for research and biotechnology development, and also the largest consumer market, that consumes 50% of the pharmaceutical market, or 44% is the United States. There is other countries that have advantages in certain aspects. Right? So it's far cheaper to get general healthcare in Mexico, right? And it's as good or even better, like we're looking at Switzerland here. Right? And they have very, very modern equipment, you pay out of pocket, even they have data measurement before and after. There's countries like Japan that have sort of accelerated access to therapies, especially with people with terminal illnesses, before they have finally been proven effective. There's countries like Dubai, you're thinking of longevity-friendly regulation, Caribbean islands like the Bahamas. I'm based in Honduras. Honduras has developed a very broad program where you can develop kind of your own regulatory system. So this is what Boston has done, with the effect of attracting medical tourism and to accelerate access for patients and make clinical trials. There's countries like Australia, which generally have a lighter, easier approach, especially to manufacturing, tax credits, then clinical trials you can run much cheaper, as you heard from Reason yesterday. So I think the United States should really think of, okay, we're the leader, okay, great, but to really sustain that advantage long term, what can we learn from other countries to really foster medical innovation for the long period instead of going to China and Australia for example.
Just to build up to that, I want to see if we get a little bit more specific on more specific policies that come before you. So you mentioned, Japan, so maybe we can expound on what it might look like, for example, if drugs were able to go to the market after what we would consider to be phase 2, after safety, maybe efficacy testing in the market, what are countries doing in regards to that. And one thing that I was going to shine a light on is there was talk earlier in terms of raising retirement and incentives, right? I think something that could be done, and any country could really be a leader in the world if they took this steer on this, particularly the U.S., is aligning the incentives of the public and government, right? So obviously there's a little bit of a discord there. Government's not going to raise retirement age, funding, people want to work less, right? So we don't want that. So maybe there's policies that could be put forth, like what if retirement retirement age could not be raised until and unless the healthy life expectancy in an equitable way was raised more than the amount that you want to raise in retirement, plus aligning the incentives. So this is something I've been talking about people like Nancy and like Clark, that we have some policies that we can put on that the public will be able to understand and speak to some of these things that they think are going on with friends that yellow vests. Anyway, open question to the panel. Any thoughts in terms of this, in terms of specific policies that you know that countries are trying or that you think is good to try?
Well, one thing I think, Audrey earlier mentioned about making aging the new COVID. I think that we can scaffold that with making aging the new AI. Once DeepSeek came out, it kind of made everyone lose their mind, and stock markets and everything went wild, just because China made a good AI model, right? And then ChatGPT took the world by storm. And I think that aging biotech is, as soon as we have one of those great breakthroughs, it's going to do the same. And we have to prepare that and make national strategy around what it's going to look like for people to start living longer, possibly breaking through historical barriers, and what that looks like as far as retirement and what the second half of life actually looks like. Where right now we're kind of preparing to go downhill and start to slow down. Maybe we want to get a second life and a second wind, and we have to be able to scaffold that appropriately.
I think the AI story is interesting because the reason that AI really blew up in culture was everybody got access to it very quickly. Like, you could actually use it. You could actually play with it. You could touch it. You could be on your phone. And this is the big problem that anti-aging, health span, and new medicines have. If you look at the development of AI over the past many decades, there's very much this recent narrative of, this is too dangerous, no one should be allowed to have it, only in like military facilities should we be able to have AI. And it's that narrative of like, this is so useful, we can't let people have it. I just saw that with AI, and I think we are still really deep in it with longevity medicine. I mean, there's the peptides, the gene therapy, small molecules that I've seen in research both this past year, past 2 years, the past 30 years, they're fantastic drugs that I think could be safely and reasonably administered to people in clinical trial settings in order to get data with healthy people. But people are afraid, and there's all of this, all these barriers to entry, and just lots and lots and lots of structures to keep people safe, but keep people safe from what? We're talking about being in the era of medicines that could legitimately enhance health span in a radically new way.
To pivot off of this, one of the issues that has sort of challenged aging research in the past is siloing, not just in terms of ineffectively working on downstream disease like disease models versus the root causes, but also in terms of international collaboration, cross-party collaboration. So a question we have for the panel is, what types of international agreements or narratives might help to align all parties, countries, to address age-related diseases significantly and mitigate any tensions that could theoretically allow us some asymmetric progress in this if we feel that's even an issue?
We definitely need an agreement where, say, OPEC countries or just some group of countries can agree that drugs approved in their jurisdiction are to be recognized in other jurisdictions. I mean, it's amazing some of the drugs that were developed in Russia that are still not approved in the U.S. or the EU and the U.S. have gotten better at kind of co-recognition, but we definitely need more of it. I think you're right that we're use some of these tensions that are naturally arising with jurisdiction and competition.
Could that also cause into drug prices and things like that?
Yeah, so just to piggyback off of what Meg said, right? So, we are now having the discovery of new tariffs in the front administration. I think many of us are learning now, as economists, that free trade is good. It benefits your country, it benefits the world. But we kind of don't have a free trade or regulatory reciprocity when it comes to drug approvals. It's kind of interesting. So I think you can have sort of a narrative about free trade. Right? So I trust your regulator, your Germany or Japan, to give you access to my market, right? Because that's what you did the work. You said it exactly right, and you exercised it to do. But your question about the overarching narrative, I think is, we don't do something, we're all going to die. So,
yeah, for sure. That one. So right now we have a few international things like the WHO and organizations to unify kind of that health is an important thing to focus on. And also with scientific innovation, it requires cross collaboration. I don't think that any super longevity drugs are going to be invented in a silo. I don't think it's possible. I think that collaboration is kind of necessary. So I think that having a worldwide initiative on focusing on aging and uncovering the underlying biology should be more highlighted, more funded, and just more appreciated as again that common unifier that's kind of driving everything. And also when it comes to the public narrative. Right now, people are mostly following influencers and celebrities and all that sort of thing about what they show about longevity. It's mentioned about nutraceuticals. The regulation actually, drives that process and gives people accurate scientific information and, does the correct subsidies and policies to actually bring this into fruition and into the public sphere of, consciousness, then that can elevate things greatly. I mean, everyone here probably heard of terms like cellular senescence, for instance, but if you ask a random person on the street what that is, they don't know that kind of thing. So their first exposure to longevity is probably going to be somebody that's taking a bunch of supplements or, doing a lot of things that they're not quite sure are proven. And not that those things are, not that sort of experimentation is that, because obviously I'm a huge supporter of, all of that sort of thing, especially with what's going on in Castro. But yeah, we just need more of the policy and regulatory space to also get behind that and to, get ahead of the conversation and, stay up to date, because we know that the science usually moves faster than policies. So it's not something that should just be ignored and put down, but rather we have to put that as a top pillar that's just as important as defense and environment and all that kind of thing.
One more thing. Also, I mentioned there's some degree of drug approval reciprocity. I would also like to see more clinical trial recognition. If the clinical trial happening in the Bahamas or in Africa or Saudi Arabia, there are common good clinical trial practice standards, there are common IRB standards. Like these trials are valuable and should be part of the recognized as valid parts of the data package. I think more of that would help accelerate this research, because then more and more parties can come to the table to do research.
Yeah, you mentioned standards there, so to intersect that with the last panel, and also sort of the public being sort of bought in psychologically to this, is I would really like to see advances in terms of digital biomarkers, functional biomarkers, determining clinical endpoints, things based on walking gait analysis, voice analysis, facial analysis. I've been helping to lead the initiative from the ASTM, the American Society of Testing Materials, to standardize this sort of data collection, being able to pull in the stakeholders from tech companies like Disney and Meta, etc. Like this. These tech companies have technologies that can be leveraged for this. So in addition to helping to potentially do clinical endpoints, your film, Jasmine, these are the kind of things that people actually care about. The average person on the street is not going to know or get excited about what their Horvath clutch score is, or their clutch is great, but they want to know, are they going to be able to walk, are they going to be able to hear the sound, are they going to work, right? So I think this could be powerful as part of the narrative, right? And to dovetail this also into, because we talk about, the potential the partisan aspect of this, right? What I would like to say is that I think all of us agree in this room that aging is the ultimate non-partisan issue, right? And the total addressable market of aging is everybody in the world, right? So how can we speak to the different sides of it? So, for example, if you're talking with those on the left wing, if you want medical withdrawal and things like this, having a society that is aging healthfully is very important for sustainability. If you're on the right wing side, having this would help you, increase personal agency and freedom, etc. Reduce lockdown times because your immune system is better, things like this. So do you have any thoughts on sort of that, the socio-political narrative and how to bring all stakeholders? Hey, this helps everybody to get through this.
Well, I really like what you said about kind of in this post-AI world, the analysis, there are so many new markers that didn't really exist before. We're not quantifiable. So I think that in the modern world, the totality of possible evidence is much bigger than it used to be. And it also reminds me that I think the nature of life is hard to measure or define and crystallize into simple variables, you know. So bringing up the concept of life or health being a partisan issue and just drives me deeper into like what is it to be fully alive and to be more and more healthy. I don't think we can really argue it's molecular the right issue, but both sides have something to contribute to the development of this.
One component about this is sort of the technological innovation side of this, what the book is down to play related policies and technologies like AI, blockchain technology, etc. So maybe Jasmine touched on something that we didn't do, but we do open this topic on how different countries have been taking different stances to these kind of technologies, what is needed in your opinion.
Earlier we were talking about incentives a lot, and so cryptocurrencies are slowly becoming more and more legitimized, and all of the kind of scammy things that kind of are associated with it are getting shaken out, and that can be used as a powerful form of incentive. When it comes to medical technology integration, blockchain technology itself can definitely help with record keeping and interoperability. There's been a long-standing problem in the healthcare field about data interoperability and the ability to share things between different facilities. So focusing more on that infrastructure for sure. And the preparation for these innovations, it kind of does vary. Some countries have taken really forward stance on let's do this now. Other ones are being more conservative with it. But I think the more that we invest in the innovation, it also lowers the starting cost. So it gets rid of the kind of concerns of the left of it being accessible and affordable to everyone. The faster that we kind of can move in that space, the cheaper the prices get. One example is whole genome sequencing. That's something that's still not part of general medical care, which it should be. The prices now are the same as a pair of designer shoes or a domestic flight or something like that. So it's definitely accessible on that level, but it should go even further as to where it should be covered under insurance too. So when it comes to the innovation piece of it, it's like the whole space has to innovate. It has to start at the educational level itself, like with medical school and everything. You have to put this kind of longevity education piece in there and make sure that it translates to the technology in the clinics.
Certain countries like Estonia are leading the way in this because digital health records, self-sovereign data ownership, things like this. I'm not sure what Prospera is doing with it, but is there anything to add on this kind of topic? Niklas?
Yeah, I wouldn't add anything on specific technology. People do talk almost the things that are already done in place, right? So, but we can deploy them at larger scale faster, for example, maybe but the really fundamental technology that Prospera is doing, which I think is also very much in the spirit of the United States idea, which is that of experimentation, to allow different states and different stakeholders to create their own experiments. Right? So the idea is that you as a business can have your own legal, your own regulatory system as long as you have liability insurance. So similarly, where the trend that get back to for both left and right is encourage experimentation. Right? So we're making, as we call things, making very big decisions for hundreds of millions of people, and you just can't get it right for everything. Right? So when people vote, for example, no older people are more disproportionate to vote, and there's issues like the retirement age, social security, things like that. So you want to kind of balance that off with longevity, but then at the same time it's not better because you have a very organized block against you that's concerned with these things. And that is to the detriment also of younger people, or people that are kind of willing to sort of to do these things, that with both more preventative therapies, but nurse who want to develop these things. So my overall broad approach to innovation, I think that we learn from Prospera is sort of the technology of how we work together, the laws we make, is to sort of allow more experimentation in the United States, especially at the state level. For example, the issue of right to try laws. The state of Montana has made very good progress there, for example. So I think that would be sort of I think that's sort of the fundamental idea of technology, I think, to become the right places to run certain things. To my last question, in terms of people having a sense of agency in their own healthcare, right? So I don't think it's any secret to say that the public is losing faith in traditional institutions to a large degree, and feel that any gains that we might make based on technologies could be sequestered to only the rich, which is what I hear all the time. And this is all while polls from organizations such as the Pew Research Center, UDrug, and AARP show that there's overwhelming consensus from all constituents that people want increases in healthy life expectancy. So the reality is that if governments want a healthy and happy society, and a society, importantly, that is happy with them as leaders, prioritizing of our aging research is a benefit to all. It's one of the most powerful ways to accomplish this. So what can we do as a field to make that reality clear to everybody in this room and in the world?
I think it's kind of starting State Department from so in the current administration, we have an initiative called Make America Healthy Again. We can kind of use that as a jumping off point for introducing this longevity science concept more into the mainstream, and being able to develop more around that concept of, it's not about, a rich billionaire, getting access to the magic life extension serum and the poor people, just dying as usual on schedule, but that it's actually something about raising the overall health and wellness of the entire population, which increases, the economic activity as we've all been discussing throughout the event. So yeah, I just think that, mobilizing behind that can, definitely have huge impacts on, the narrative and the overall understanding of what it actually means to be prioritizing longevity or health span, whatever we want to call it, that it gets more into the cultural psyche and, kind of demystifies it a little bit.
Yeah, so I agree on that point with many in other industries, right? I think the most important thing really is on us to do, and that is to do it well, right? So we need in such a human mobility to have like blood and something that we can point at that really reliably works and works for large numbers of people and is cheap and accessible. So I think the most important thing really from the perspective of the public policy perspective is conclusively to allow to remove barriers to make that happen. Not necessarily to, because we're in Washington and local interest groups ask for money or prioritize nothing. I think it's really an us to do it. And what us as policymakers is listen to us, what are the roadblocks that are in the way, and see that we can remove them.
Aside from just obviously more funding to other AIDS cluster, generally, and
that's very important.
Aside from that,
by all means,
what other sort of specific policies specifically have helped that expanded access to things that more systemically into the system?
Funding for ARPA AIDS, yeah, back to the previous question, but I have a gene therapy company devoted to public health. Genes are an information technology. It's the way that information is encoded, stored, and transferred between biological beings, between people. And the whole point of an information technology is that it is broadly and fairly evenly distributed over the entire society. So I think these fears of, there will be this one magical sauce that only you don't get to have and some other person has. That's not the goal or the idea of what's going to happen. I think what we have already seen with the invention of solid-state computing devices has really shown that everyone has the same outcome. Everyone has access to Bitcoin or email. It's flat. And that's how gene therapy is going to be as well for everybody. I think people were quite surprised how quickly computers were adopted, how quickly the internet was adopted, how quickly cryptocurrency was adopted. It's amazing to see now what the new administration is saying about Bitcoin, which used to be like an underground radical form. I think we're going to see that with longevity, drugs and longevity science too.
100%. So obviously I'm a big proponent of everything you just said, like the try, etc. But I also think it should be said that in addition to working to expand access, there is a sort of democratizing and equitability angle inherent to aging research, period, right? So one of the things that was relevant to, for example, Martin Luther King's core people's teaching, introduction to research and time of death, was building into that narrative that the burdens of an aging society are disproportionately borne by women, by minorities, by the poor. That if we can get this right, just naturally, it will help preserve all those individuals. So I think that is an important point for intersectionality and all stakeholders. Based on the panel earlier, it was mentioned that for the 51% population are women. I believe it's also something like 80% that women in the U.S. are the primary decision makers for family health care, right? So it's very important that we speak to this narrative that this is a human thing. This brings everybody to the table, right, in all those. Any quick thoughts on that before we take a few questions?
Education is powerful. So yeah, I think just that basic understanding of what's actually happening is definitely where we need to begin. To kind of dispel the extremism that kind of arises sometimes in the political space and bring everything more to a moderate position and grounded in science.
Something Jasmine said, like that whole genome sequencing. What is the real standard of care? What should be the medical standard of care? I had my mind wandering. I remember this tweet that Adam was really funny. And it was like, I would die for my children. Well, would you work 3 times a week, do low intensity steady state cardio regularly, and optimize your diet for your children? Because the way to show up for your family and your community is to take self-responsibility for your own health. So, that's just something that we can see.
100%. I mean, one of the ways I like to phrase it into this feeling for things, right, is that inherent to being an advocate for aging research, right, is the notion that life is good, and life's more than just good. So that's why we want to make it clear that what we're advocating for is increased health span, increased time of research, yeah, I think that's a good way to pivot it to any questions that might be on the floor.
Excellent panel. So important information in terms of international recognition. Texas Senator Ted Cruz has had legislation in the House to do exactly that. I'm not sure if he introduced it or not, but there is that out there now that the new administration that might get a higher level of interest. In terms of international cooperation, Israel has a very interesting anti-aging thing going with the UK, and right now people in Washington, by the way, and the longevity pact are working on exactly that sort of thing with the U.S., and we see that as a great template. The final thing is coming to a lot of you in terms of education. If you ask the average person about some of these things, they have no clue what's going on, because they've had no reason to have any clue about what's going on, because their insurance is usually picked by their workplace, and then they get a very high deductible, and all the mess there. So it seems like that's one of the things where you, for example, patients, individuals, could choose where their money goes. Then suddenly you've got a market, and they're looking at stock markets, or they're looking at their cheap places, and then you really have the same kind of dynamics that you have with iPhones and stuff.
That's a great point. We're talking about government regulation, but also there's a place for companies' incentive programs, right? Some of the companies I've been at, it's like, okay, if you just show us a doctor's note that you went to the doctor 1-2 years, you get the antibiotics, right? But wouldn't it be so much better if you test well on these biomarker scores, you get to make them incentive? Other questions? One more.
So these conversations about self-experimentation and like the deep-sea versus ChatGPT, national competition makes me think about what are some projects that we could put forward as the longevity community that spur this like national sense of competition. Some of the kind of community like the race for the first 130-year-old or the Super Centenarian Olympics or the Genetic Engineering Olympics or something like that. Do you guys have any thoughts of projects that we could put out there that like if the U.S. says we're going to do it, then all these other countries are, oh yeah, we want to do that too, and then kind of gets excitement and public attention and research.
Yeah, I guess I could speak to this. I think that's a very interesting idea to almost create, a quality of life arms race, like a good arms race, right? XPRIZE is working on this in some regard. Also, this is dovetails into the last panel a little bit, where having really clear standards would be helpful for certain things like biomarkers, right? And this is where companies, I don't want to speak for them, but this is where companies like Disney or whatever could potentially be motivated to come on board. If we had a competition, or it's a little bit of far field, but what if there was a large video game streaming esports competition with people raising funds for different works for people being tested on different kinds of biomarkers. And people like celebrities, you're going to Steve Aoki saying this is important, back my team, or back this person, or Chris Hemsworth, very focused on dementia work, etc. So I think there's real opportunities for this.
I really like the review of the Olympics. I think that's been the most organic hearing and competition that arose and brought new attention and new participation. Obviously, there's the $101 million health span exercise, which is super cool. I think of countries like Bhutan, who have had this narrative of gross national happiness, which roughly correlates to quality of life. And in Dubai, the payment has a fiscal goal of doubling the quality of life for those people there. And I think what I'm just hesitant about with government initiatives is like I live in Austin, and in 2000, I think they passed a city-wide initiative to become a zero-carbon city, and that like everything was going to be zero carbon, and then absolutely nothing was done, nothing else was done. It's easy to pass a resolution or like say we're willing to spend a lot of money on that. But on the other hand, we have done things like we're going to send men to the moon, and then they just didn't. So it's about the results and about community getting results, not being hand-wavy.
Great. Good sentiment to wrap up on. And at that, we're at time. Thanks, everyone. If you enjoyed the panel, big round of applause. Thank you, guys. Thank you.